Have you ever wondered how close you've come to danger without even realizing it? At Shivering Vault, we take you there, one story at a time. But before you drift off, consider liking this video, commenting where you're watching from and at what time, and subscribing to keep these chilling stories coming. Now, let's dive into these unsettling tales. I've never been the type to share personal stories, especially not on the internet. But after what happened, I feel like I have no choice. Something happened to us on our little farm in the middle of nowhere, something that still haunts me. If it weren't for the police report, I'd almost think it was a nightmare. But it wasn't. I lived through it. We lived through it. Let me start by introducing myself. I'm Tom Whitmore. My wife, Rachel, and I have lived on a farm for the past 7 years. It's nothing fancy, just a small piece of land out in the Texas countryside, about 45 minutes from the nearest town. The house is old, built back in the 40s. A wraparound porch, creaky floors, big windows that let in the sunlight and let you stare out into the never-ending fields of corn, the rows of trees lining the property, and beyond that, just an unbroken horizon. I had always loved it here. Rachel and I moved from the city after we'd both had enough of the noise, the rush, the constant feeling that you're being pulled in 100 different directions. This place was a dream come true. No neighbors for miles, the only sound at night being the wind rustling through the trees, the occasional hoot of an owl, or the chirp of crickets in the summer. We loved the peace and the simplicity of it all. That peace was shattered the night we came home from our weekend trip to Waco. We left for the weekend to visit Rachel's sister, something we don't do often. It's not that we don't like company. Rachel and her sister get along great. But it was a rare occasion where we both had a couple of days to relax, free of farm work and the constant demands of daily life. When you're living in the country, things can get a little monotonous. The roads are long, the days are hot, and sometimes you feel like you're just waiting for the seasons to change. We packed up the truck Friday morning, said goodbye to the farm, and set off for Waco. The trip was peaceful. Just the two of us, the open road, and the steady hum of the engine as we made our way to her sister's house. We stayed there for 2 nights, enjoyed the family time, laughed over old memories, and ate too much food, just like we always did. But when it was time to come home, we were both eager to return to our quiet little farmhouse. It was late in the afternoon when we got back, the sun hanging low on the horizon. I remember the light was that golden color, the kind that makes everything look like it's bathed in warmth, like a picture postcard. The kind of light that makes you forget how big the world really is, and how small your life feels in the grand scheme of things. But as we turned down our gravel driveway and saw the house in the distance, I noticed something. "Hey, Tom." The door's open. Rachel's voice cut through my thoughts, pulling me out of my daydream. I squinted through the windshield. Sure enough, the back door to the kitchen was slightly ajar. It wasn't wide open, but it was definitely not how we'd left it. The breeze had picked up a little, stirring the trees at the edge of the property, but it didn't feel like it was enough to push the door open on its own. We must have forgotten to lock it," I said, trying to sound casual, but a small part of me felt uneasy. We had always been careful about locking up when we left, but in a small place like this, who would even bother to break in? It didn't make sense. Rachel wasn't convinced. I could see the concern in her eyes. "Maybe," she said slowly, "but it's kind of strange, don't you think?" I shrugged, trying to ease her mind. "It's fine. Let's just get inside and relax." I pushed the thought from my mind as we unloaded the truck and made our way inside. The house smelled like it always did. A mix of dust, wood, and something faintly like old leather. The creaks of the floorboards beneath our feet were familiar, comforting. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. We put everything away, took off our shoes, and settled into the living room, where we collapsed into the couch after the long drive. Rachel poured us both a cup of tea, and we talked about the trip, about her sister's kids, and how much we enjoyed the break. I felt that familiar feeling of peace wash over me as we sat there. The kind of stillness you can only get after a few days away from the grind. The kind that makes you forget that there's an entire world out there beyond your little corner of it. But that night, something wasn't right. It started out subtle, the way these things often do. A slight noise here, a soft creak there. I chalked it up to the house settling. The old place always made noise, especially when the weather shifted. The temperature was cooler now, the kind of fall chill that makes houses feel like they're breathing, creaking, stretching a bit after the hot summer months. But then I woke up. I don't know why, but I woke up in the middle of the night. Maybe it was the wind outside or some noise, or maybe I just wasn't sleeping well. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the silence when I heard something, a faint sound, creaking, slow, almost like something heavy was moving around beneath us. At first, I thought it was the house, just the usual groans and shifts, but as I listened, it became clear. This wasn't the usual creaking. I nudged Rachel, not wanting to wake her with a sudden movement, but I needed to be sure. "Rachel, did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice hoarse from sleep. She stirred beside me, mumbling something incoherent, but I could tell she was awake now. "What is it?" she asked, her voice laced with uncertainty. "I don't know," I said, my heart picking up speed. "It's coming from downstairs. It sounds like footsteps." Rachel's grip on my arm tightened, and I could feel her pulse quickening. She was always the more intuitive one, always noticing the small things that I might miss. She didn't have to say it, but I knew she was thinking the same thing I was. There was someone downstairs. I sat up slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible. The house was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I grabbed the flashlight off the nightstand, clicking it on and off, trying to keep the beam steady. I motioned for Rachel to follow me. We crept down the stairs, the wooden steps groaning under our weight. The flashlight beam flickered, cutting through the pitch-black darkness. Every little sound felt amplified. The wind outside had picked up, rattling the windows, and in the distance I could hear the soft rustling of trees. But those noises were nothing compared to the ones coming from below. The basement. I froze halfway down the stairs. I heard it again. Those unmistakable footsteps, slow but heavy, dragging, coming from the basement. Not random, not haphazard. There was someone down there. Tom. Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper, her breath sharp with fear. "Stay close," I said, barely above a whisper myself. I didn't want to make any sound, but my heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. I moved toward the basement door, trying to keep my hands from shaking as I gripped the old brass handle. The door was solid, heavy, built to last. But in that moment, it didn't feel like enough. We both stood there, holding our breath, listening. The house was so still now, as though it was waiting too. Then came another sound, a faint shuffle, followed by a thud, like something had fallen. It came from inside the basement. And then footsteps, louder this time, faster. Someone was coming up the stairs. I didn't think, I just reacted. I locked the door immediately. "Someone's in there," I whispered, my voice shaking now. Rachel's face was pale, her hands trembling. She gripped my arm so tightly I thought her nails might dig into my skin. But I couldn't reassure her. I couldn't reassure myself. We backed away from the door, making our way to the kitchen, where I grabbed the old hunting rifle we kept stored above the cabinets. It wasn't loaded, but it was enough to buy us some time. I called 911, trying to keep my voice steady, but the operator's voice was distant, as if it was happening to someone else. I explained the situation and gave the address. And then we heard it. A sound from outside. A dragging sound. It was coming from the side of the house. That's when I saw him. A man, his body covered in dirt and grime, crawling desperately toward the small escape window in the basement. His skin was pale, almost sickly looking. He moved like a man who'd been hiding for days, maybe even weeks. He didn't see us at first. The sirens screamed into the distance, red and blue flashing across the yard just in time. Deputies arrived in a blur, tackling the man before he could get far. I just stood there, frozen in disbelief, watching as they pulled him away. This wasn't just some petty thief. This man had been hiding here, in my home. It turns out he was a fugitive, a criminal on the run, wanted for a string of robberies, and worse, and he'd been using quiet, remote homes like ours to rest and regroup. I don't know what would have happened if the police hadn't arrived. I don't want to think about it. I've never been one to tell stories like this. I'm not some guy who likes to exaggerate or make things sound scarier than they are. I guess it's because I've never had much reason to. I grew up in a small town in Texas, used to wide open fields, quiet nights, and the distant howls of coyotes. I was a pretty straightforward guy, but when I took the job guarding those oil rigs last summer, everything changed. At 21, I was still figuring things out. I'd dropped out of college a year before and had been jumping from one odd job to the next. Then one day, I saw the ad in the paper. A company needed a night watchman for a small private oil lease in West Texas. The pay was decent and the job was simple. Make sure the equipment was running, report any issues, and keep an eye on things overnight. They told me I'd be living in a rundown trailer near the site and that I'd be alone. Sounds peaceful, right? I was used to the quiet, and living on a lease a few hundred yards away from the equipment didn't seem too bad. No one around for miles, just me and the oil rigs, a few hundred acres of dusty desert, and the occasional wildlife. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that the silence of that place would be the thing that haunted me the most. The first couple of days were fine. The trailer was small and nothing to brag about, just a single-room box on wheels with a few old pieces of furniture, nothing fancy. But it had what I needed: a bed, a table, a fridge to keep my food cold. The oil company gave me a small gas-powered generator to keep the lights on, and I set up my cot near the window, facing the oil pumps. It was a typical West Texas summer. The sun would burn the sky to a harsh, unforgiving white by day, and then the temperature would drop as the night fell. The cool breeze that swept through the desert was a relief after the heat, but it carried with it the scent of dust and dry brush, this heavy, almost suffocating dryness that made the air feel thick, like you could chew it. But at night, the wind was quiet, almost still. The only sound you'd hear was the slow, rhythmic clank of the pump jacks. The nights were eerily silent, except for that mechanical noise. After a long day of sitting in the heat, I'd usually crash early. But then I started hearing things. The first night I heard the footsteps, I didn't think much of it. I figured it was some animal, maybe a coyote or a stray dog wandering by. The sound was soft, just a shuffle in the dirt, faint but distinct. I tried to ignore it, but the sound kept coming back. Not often, just enough to make me uneasy. Maybe the wind was moving the brush, I thought, or maybe it was a trick of the quiet, the way the sounds of the desert can play with your mind. The next night it happened again, soft footsteps. This time I was sure I could hear them moving around the trailer near the window, like someone was walking slowly, deliberately on the other side of the wall. I stood up and crept to the window. The moon was full, casting long shadows over the dry landscape. There was no one there. I didn't know what to think. I felt a slight unease. Nothing major, just a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. But I brushed it off. The nights wore on like this. Footsteps would appear and then vanish. Sometimes I thought I heard the faintest scrape of metal against the metal of the trailer, like someone tapping on it with a small rock or a stick. But each time I'd open the door, there'd be nothing. Just the empty, dry land stretching out in front of me. And then came the whispers. I first heard it the third night. The same whispering sound that would echo just outside my door, them too faint to make out what was being said. It was low, almost like a voice speaking in the wind, but somehow more deliberate. I froze. I could hear it clearly now, the words too muffled to understand, but distinct enough to be unnerving. I could almost feel the sound, like it was seeping through the walls, like someone was standing just outside speaking to me. I told myself it was the wind again. I told myself that I was just imagining things. The wind can make strange noises, right? But it didn't stop. It wasn't just wind. It was something else. The whispers continued each night, getting a little louder, a little clearer. But whenever I went to the door, there was nothing. Just the oppressive desert silence. And then, one night, I heard a knock. It wasn't a loud bang, but just a soft tap. A light, almost polite knock on the metal door, like someone was trying to get my attention. I stood frozen in place. My heart pounded in my chest, my mind racing. There was no animal I knew that would knock on a door. I opened the door quickly, swinging it wide, expecting to find something, anything. The desert night greeted me, dark and still. The light from the trailer's lamp cast a yellow glow, but I could see nothing except the endless stretch of dry grass and a few scattered bushes. I stepped outside, looking around. Nothing. But that was the moment I started to feel like something was off, like I wasn't alone out there, and that's when I began sleeping with a crowbar beside my bed. I thought about installing a motion sensor light, but something told me that wouldn't help. Still, I did it anyway, setting it up around the perimeter of the trailer. It was a tiny step in feeling a little bit safer, but it didn't change anything. A few more days passed, and each night felt more suffocating than the last. The footsteps were more frequent now, not just around the trailer, but near the oil pumps too, like someone was walking in the darkness just outside the edge of the light. The whispers became clearer, more insistent. They seemed to come from every direction. I kept hearing that tapping against the metal of the trailer, always at night. I tried to tell myself it was just the isolation getting to me, but deep down, I knew better. Something wasn't right. One night, after hearing a loud bang on the door, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the crowbar and went outside. The air felt colder than usual, and the wind howled as it passed through the brush. The pumps clanked rhythmically in the background, but there was something else in the air, something charged. My heart raced in my chest as I stepped outside, scanning the darkness. There, just at the edge of the light, I saw him. A man. He was standing perfectly still, just out of reach of the light from the trailer, like he was waiting for me to see him. His clothes were torn and dusty, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His posture was unnerving, too still, like he had been waiting for hours. I froze. He didn't move. He didn't even acknowledge me. Just stood there, silent, his hand gripping something shiny. A knife, I realized. It gleamed in the moonlight. I backed up slowly, my eyes locked on him. My mind was racing. What the hell was going on? Who was this guy? What did he want? Who are you? I called out, my voice barely a whisper in the heavy silence. No response. I shouted again, louder this time. What do you want? He didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He just stayed there, watching me. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he slowly turned and walked into the darkness, disappearing into the desert like a shadow. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, my hands shaking as I slammed the door shut and locked it. I called 911, but my phone was barely working. By the time I got through, it felt like hours had passed. 30 minutes later, deputies arrived, but by then, the man was long gone. They searched the area. They found him. They found him hiding in a rusted-out water tank a few acres away. A former temp worker who'd been fired for stealing equipment. He'd been living out there for weeks, lurking around, hoping to scare off any new guards. His plan was simple: scare me enough so that I'd leave, and then he could keep looting the place. They arrested him, but it didn't make me feel better. I quit the job that morning. I packed up my things, got in my truck, and left without looking back. I never finished my contract. The money wasn't worth it. The fear, the feeling that someone was watching me all the time, was too much. This happened during spring break earlier this year, and I still get chills thinking about it. I go to college in San Antonio, but I grew up in a smaller town in central Texas, not far from Waco. Anyway, I didn't have anything big planned for the break. Was just going to chill at home, maybe work a few shifts at the grocery store where I used to bag during high school. Then I got a text from this older couple, the Crawfords. They were friends of my parents and had this big piece of land outside of town, like way out. Their ranch is set on this long gravel road that breaks off from the highway and just disappears into fields and mesquite trees. Kind of peaceful, but also kind of lonely, you know? I used to mow their lawn back in high school, and they remembered I was good with dogs. They were heading to Houston for the week to see their grandkids and needed someone to watch their German Shepherd, Duke. He's a big dog, but super smart and friendly. I figured, why not? They offered me $300 for the week, and I could stay at their place with free food, a nice TV, and no siblings around. Sounded like a solid deal. So I packed a duffel bag and drove out the afternoon before they left. It took about 25 minutes from my house, most of it down that long, bumpy road. Their place is nice, modest, one story with a metal roof and a big wraparound porch. The backyard backs up to this cluster of trees, and off to the side there's this old chicken coop. I remember asking Mr. Crawford once if they still used it, and he just laughed and said it hadn't seen a chicken since the 90s. The first 2 days were uneventful. I slept in, made sandwiches, watched a lot of TV. Duke mostly napped on the rug or followed me around when I'd go outside. I took him on walks around the edge of the property during the day. He liked sniffing around the fence line, sometimes pausing like he heard something, but I figured it was deer or coyotes. This is Texas, after all. But nights were a different story. It got dark out there, like pitch black. The kind of black where you can't see your own hand unless the porch light's on. And it was dead quiet. No neighbors, no traffic, no random sounds except the wind or branches creaking. By the third night, I was used to the quiet. I stayed up late watching some sci-fi movie, had the lights low, and Duke was curled up by the sliding glass door that looked out over the backyard. Around 11 p.m., he stood up suddenly. Not like stretching or getting comfy, but alert. Ears perked, tail stiff. I paused the movie. He started pacing. His nails clicked against the tile as he went to the back door, then the side window, then back again. He let out this low whine, barely audible, but his body was tense. I figured he had to pee or something, so I unlocked the door and let him out. He took off across the yard, no hesitation. Didn't even sniff around. He went straight toward the coop. That's when I got this weird feeling in my chest. Not panic exactly, just like I shouldn't follow. I stayed by the door watching. A minute later, Duke stopped and started growling. Not barking, just this deep vibrating growl aimed at the old coop. Then I heard it. A voice. A man's voice. Low. Calming. Hush now. Easy. My blood ran cold. I wasn't imagining it. It was clear. Real. Not coming from a speaker or the TV. It was outside. I stood frozen for a second, my hands still on the door frame. Duke was barking now. Fur up. Teeth out. Not moving forward, though. Just barking like mad. I slowly backed away, grabbed my phone, and called 911. I told them someone was on the property, possibly trying to break in, and that I was alone. The dispatcher told me to stay inside, keep the doors locked, and wait for the sheriff. I turned off all the lights and sat low under the front window. I could still hear Duke outside, barking nonstop, and something moving around near the coop. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling. It felt like forever, But maybe 10 minutes later, I saw the flicker of red and blue lights bouncing off the trees. A cruiser turned down the gravel drive fast. I opened the door just enough to peek. I saw a man, dirty shirt, scraggly beard, sprint out from the side of the coupe, heading toward the trees. He almost made it, but one of the deputies tackled him hard into the dirt. There was yelling, cuffs, more lights. Eventually, they brought the guy up to the porch in zip ties and sat him down. One of the deputies came inside to talk to me. Told me I did the right thing, said the guy had been watching the house, waiting. Turns out he'd done this before, broke into a house in another Texas county, hurt someone bad. Did time, got out early. He'd probably been out there for hours. Watching. Waiting for the lights to go out. Waiting for me to fall asleep. They told me if Duke hadn't reacted, or if I'd brushed it off like nothing, it could have gone way differently. Mr. and Mrs. Crawford came back early the next day. I didn't sleep at all that night. Just sat on the couch with Duke at my feet, every light in the house turned on. I don't dog sit anymore. I still see Duke sometimes when I visit home. He still runs up and licks my hand like always. But I never forget that night.